Somebody get this black homeless mechanic away from that Harley before he contaminates it. Garrett Sloan roared, storming across the rain-soaked parking lot. He violently slapped the wrench out of Isaiah Brooks's hand, sending it skidding across the wet pavement. Garrett stepped closer, his lip curling with disgust. "Look at you. You smell like the street, you're covered in grease, and you actually think people trust a homeless black man to touch a motorcycle worth more than you'll make in your entire life." The crowd fell silent. But Garrett wasn't finished. He jabbed a finger into Isaiah's chest and laughed. "You don't need a toolbox. You need a cardboard sign that says, 'Anything helps.' That's the only career you're qualified for." A few uncomfortable chuckles rippled through the crowd. Then Garrett snatched a thick envelope of cash from the Harley owner's hand and deliberately scattered $100 bills into a muddy puddle. "There!" he shouted. "Get down on your knees and earn it. That's the only position a man like you was ever meant to have." Isaiah never looked at the money. Without saying a word, he picked up his battered wrench, tightened one final bolt, and gently wiped the rain from the Harley's fuel tank. The engine thundered to life with a perfect, unmistakable roar. Every face turned toward Isaiah. The Harley's owner slowly removed his helmet, staring at the quiet mechanic with growing disbelief. By the next morning, Garrett Sloan would discover that humiliating one homeless black mechanic had just cost him everything he had spent a lifetime building. Before we reveal what happened next, tell us where you're watching from and what time it is in your city. If you believe character is worth more than appearance and justice always finds its way, subscribe to the channel and stay with us, because this story is only getting started. Hey everybody. I've never once regretted saying yes to a stranger's invitation, and I've said yes more times than sense would allow. The morning after the confrontation, Milwaukee woke beneath a blanket of gray clouds and the lingering scent of rain. While commuters hurried toward office buildings with steaming cups of coffee in their hands, Isaiah Brooks folded the same weathered blanket he had slept under for nearly 3 years. His home was nothing more than a small corner beneath an aging railroad bridge overlooking the Menomonee River. A rusted shopping cart held everything he owned: 2 sets of worn clothes, a sleeping bag patched together with duct tape, an old toolbox with chipped red paint, and a faded photograph tucked carefully inside a waterproof plastic bag. Every morning followed the same quiet ritual. Isaiah washed his face with cold water from a public fountain, carefully shaved, using a cracked mirror no larger than his palm, and cleaned every wrench in his toolbox before touching a single motorcycle. It wasn't because anyone expected perfection from a homeless man. It was because he expected it from himself. A few blocks away sat an abandoned gas station that everyone else had forgotten. The pumps no longer worked, the sign had long since fallen apart, and weeds pushed through the cracked concrete. Yet behind the building stood a small makeshift workbench Isaiah had built from discarded wooden pallets. That forgotten corner had become his workshop. Word had quietly spread throughout the neighborhood. If your bike breaks down and you can't afford a mechanic, people would whisper, "Go find the man under the bridge." By 8 o'clock, his first customer arrived. A young delivery driver named Luis rolled in on an old Harley Sportster that sputtered with every turn of the throttle. "I'm sorry," Luis said nervously. "I only have $37. Isaiah smiled as he removed the air filter. "You need those $37 more than I do." Within 20 minutes, he had cleaned the clogged carburetor, adjusted the idle, replaced a cracked vacuum hose using spare parts from his collection, and tuned the engine until it purred smoothly. Luis stared in disbelief. "How much do I owe you?" Isaiah simply closed his toolbox. "Just help someone else when they need it." Luis tried to insist. Isaiah refused every dollar, As the young man rode away, an elderly woman pushing a grocery cart stopped nearby. "Morning, Mr. Brooks." "Morning, Miss Eleanor." She handed him a warm paper bag. "I baked too many biscuits." Isaiah chuckled softly. "You always bake too many. And you always pretend to believe me." For a brief moment, both of them laughed. It was one of the few sounds of genuine happiness beneath that old bridge. Not everyone treated him with kindness. Late that morning, two teenagers walked past carrying expensive motorcycle helmets. One glanced toward Isaiah and smirked. "I can't imagine ending up like that." The other laughed. "I'd rather junk my bike than let some homeless guy touch it." Isaiah heard every word. He simply continued rebuilding a damaged clutch assembly without lifting his head. Years ago, insults like those would have burned. Now they passed over him like the wind. Because he had learned something, poverty teaches faster than success ever could. The loudest opinions usually came from people who had never lost everything. Around noon, a familiar black SUV rolled quietly to the opposite side of the street. Inside sat Benjamin Cole. Unlike the previous day, he wasn't dressed like an ordinary rider. He wore a navy business suit, though he deliberately remained inside the vehicle. His assistant, Olivia Mercer, sat beside him scrolling through a tablet. "I checked every public record," she said quietly. "Isaiah Brooks, mechanical engineer, graduated top of his class from the University of Wisconsin nearly 25 years ago." Benjamin frowned. "Engineer," Olivia nodded. "He worked for Iron Dominion Motor Company before disappearing." Benjamin looked back toward the abandoned station where Isaiah was patiently repairing another stranger's motorcycle. "That doesn't make sense. And it gets stranger." She turned the screen toward him. The multiple patents were filed by Iron Dominion shortly after Isaiah disappeared. Benjamin studied the engineering diagrams displayed on the tablet. Something about them unsettled him. "They look years ahead of their time," Olivia finished. Benjamin remained silent. Across the street, Isaiah carefully tightened the final bolt on a touring bike owned by an elderly veteran. The man reached for his wallet. Isaiah stopped him with a gentle shake of his head. "No charge." The veteran looked confused. "You spent almost an hour." "I know." "Then why?" Isaiah smiled faintly. "My father used to say that when someone trusts you with the machine that carries them home, they're giving you something bigger than money." The veteran slowly lowered his wallet. "You remind me of someone." Isaiah's smile faded for just a second. "So do you." As the motorcycle disappeared down the road, Benjamin quietly whispered, "Who are you really?" Before Olivia could answer, another notification appeared on her tablet. Her expression changed immediately. "Sir." "What is it?" "The CEO of Iron Dominion, Garrett Sloan." Benjamin looked up. "What about him?" "He just scheduled an emergency executive meeting." Benjamin raised an eyebrow. "Over what?" Olivia hesitated. "The agenda simply says—" She read the words aloud. "Locate Isaiah Brooks immediately." Neither of them spoke for several seconds. Across the street, completely unaware that powerful people had suddenly begun searching for him, Isaiah wiped grease from his hands and looked toward the cloudy sky. He had no idea that one selfless decision on a rainy roadside had awakened ghosts buried for decades. And somewhere inside Iron Dominion's towering headquarters, Garrett Sloan was staring at an old employee file with a face drained of color. Because the man he had spent years making the world forget had just reappeared. Garrett Sloan stood alone in the executive boardroom on the 42nd floor of Iron Dominion Motor Company. The panoramic windows overlooked downtown Milwaukee, where hundreds of motorcycles flowed through the morning traffic like streams of polished chrome. Normally, the view filled him with pride. Today, it filled him with fear. A thick personnel file lay open on the conference table. Across the front was a faded employee photograph. Isaiah Brooks, 20 years younger. Clean-cut, confident. Wearing the Navy engineering uniform Garrett remembered all too well. Garrett stared at the picture until his jaw tightened. "I buried you," he muttered under his breath. "You're supposed to be gone." The boardroom door opened. Chief Legal Officer Denise Harper stepped inside, followed by Head of Security Victor Kane. "You wanted us immediately?" Denise asked. Garrett slid the file across the table. "I want everything you can find on Isaiah Brooks." Victor frowned. "See, I thought he disappeared years ago." "So did I." Garrett poured himself a glass of expensive bourbon despite the early hour. Yesterday, he repaired a Harley belonging to someone important. How important? I don't know yet. Garrett slammed the glass onto the table. But nobody refuses $5,000 unless they're either incredibly stupid or they already know their own worth. Silence settled over the room. Victor slowly flipped through Isaiah's file. Mechanical Engineering Division. He stopped. Lead designer. Garrett snatched the folder back before Victor could continue reading. That part is irrelevant. Denise noticed his unusually sharp reaction. "Is there something in this file we should know?" Garrett forced a smile. No. But inside, panic had already begun spreading, because he remembered every detail of the night that destroyed Isaiah Brooks, 23 years earlier. Iron Dominion had been a struggling motorcycle manufacturer on the edge of bankruptcy. Investors were pulling out. Banks refused new loans. Then Isaiah, the youngest engineer on the research team, presented an experimental combustion system, unlike anything anyone had seen. The prototype increased fuel efficiency dramatically while delivering more power with fewer moving parts. It wasn't just innovative, it was revolutionary. Garrett had congratulated him, praised him, invited him into his office. 3 days later. Isaiah was accused of stealing confidential company research. Security footage conveniently disappeared. Witness statements suddenly changed. The board voted to terminate him immediately. No criminal charges were filed. No investigation followed. Just enough lies to destroy his reputation forever. Garrett closed the memory as quickly as it surfaced. "Find him," he ordered. "I don't care where he's sleeping. I don't care what it costs. I want to know every person he talks to." Victor nodded. "We'll have someone watching him today. And one more thing." Garrett's voice turned cold. "If he still has anything from those old research days," he paused, "it disappears." Across the city, Isaiah spent the afternoon helping a single mother whose motorcycle refused to start outside a grocery store. Her 8-year-old daughter watched with wide eyes as Isaiah listened carefully to the engine. "You can hear what's broken?" the little girl asked. Isaiah smiled. "Engines tell stories." "They do, they always do." He gently placed her small hand against the fuel tank. "Listen carefully." The girl giggled as the engine vibrated beneath her fingertips. "It sounds happy now." Isaiah laughed softly. "That's because someone finally listened." The mother reached into her purse. "I'm paying you this time." Isaiah shook his head. "No. You've already bought groceries. I saw you counting every dollar." Tears filled the woman's eyes. "You don't even know us." "I don't have to." She stared at him for a long moment before quietly whispering, "God hasn't forgotten you." Isaiah looked away. Some days he believed those words. Some days he wasn't so sure. Late that evening, as the streets emptied and the city lights reflected across the river, Isaiah pushed his shopping cart back beneath the bridge. The place wasn't much. A folding chair, a portable camping stove, several motorcycle manuals stacked neatly inside a weatherproof container. Everything had its place, especially one object, a rusted military ammunition box hidden beneath loose wooden boards. Isaiah carefully lifted it out. Inside lay dozens of yellowing engineering sketches, hand-drawn engine diagrams, notebook pages covered in calculations, prototype blueprints. Every page bore the same signature: Isaiah Brooks. He slowly traced his fingers across the oldest drawing. So much life, he whispered. So many years. Those papers represented everything that had been stolen from him. Not just inventions, his career, his marriage, his reputation, his future. He closed the box and carefully returned it beneath the floorboards. Hidden in the shadows across the street, another pair of eyes watched every movement. Victor Kane lowered his camera. "There it is," he muttered. Into his earpiece he said, "Target confirmed." "He's protecting some kind of metal container. Most likely evidence." A voice answered through the radio. Garrett himself. "Don't touch it yet." Victor frowned. "Why wait?" "Because desperate people make mistakes." Garrett smiled coldly on the other end of the call. "But we'll let him believe he's safe. Then we'll take everything." Hours later, Isaiah finally drifted to sleep beneath the bridge. The city became quiet. Only the distant whistle of freight trains echoed through the darkness. Just after 2 o'clock in the morning, headlights appeared. One pickup truck, then another. 4 masked men climbed out carrying crowbars and baseball bats. Without a word, they began smashing everything. The folding chair splintered. The camping stove was kicked into the river. His toolbox crashed against the concrete, scattering polished wrenches across the ground. One man grabbed the weatherproof container and hurled every engineering manual into the muddy water. Another laughed. Homeless trash. The noise finally woke Isaiah. He rushed forward. "Stop!" One attacker drove a shoulder into his chest, throwing him onto the pavement. Isaiah struggled back to his feet. "My tools!" Another crowbar slammed into the wooden platform where he slept. Boards exploded apart. His heart nearly stopped. The ammunition box. Before he could reach it, one masked man ripped up the floorboards. He bent down, then suddenly froze. "There it is." Isaiah lunged desperately. "No!" The man lifted the old metal box into the air. Even through the darkness, Isaiah recognized exactly what had been taken. 23 years of truth. 23 years of hope. The truck engines roared to life. Isaiah chased them barefoot across the empty street until the taillights disappeared into the night. He stood alone in the middle of the road, breathing heavily, his hands shaking uncontrollably. For the first time in years, fear outweighed hope, because the one thing that could finally clear his name had just been stolen. The icy morning air settled over Milwaukee as Isaiah Brooks remained standing in the middle of the empty street, staring at the fading taillights until they disappeared completely. His chest rose and fell in ragged breaths. The old metal ammunition box was gone. For anyone else, it looked like nothing more than a rusted container rescued from a junkyard. To Isaiah, it held 23 years of truth, his entire life. He slowly walked back beneath the bridge. The destruction was worse than he remembered. His sleeping bag had been ripped open, feathers scattered across the wet concrete like dirty snow. His toolbox lay upside down, every carefully polished wrench tossed into the mud. The wooden workbench he had spent weeks building had been smashed into splinters. Isaiah knelt silently. Instead of crying over the broken shelter, he searched desperately through every piece of debris, every board, every soaked notebook, every torn piece of canvas. Maybe, just maybe, they had overlooked something. Nearly 30 minutes later, he stopped digging. Nothing, the blueprints, the engineering journals, his handwritten calculations, every page proving the original invention had belonged to him, had vanished. Isaiah lowered his head. For the first time in years, he questioned whether hope had finally abandoned him. At sunrise, Eleanor arrived with her usual paper bag of warm biscuits. The smile she always carried disappeared the instant she saw the wreckage. "My lord." She rushed toward him. "Isaiah, who did this?" He forced a faint smile. "Just kids looking for trouble." She knew immediately he was lying. "No." She gently placed a hand on his shoulder. "This wasn't vandalism. This was hunting." Isaiah didn't answer, because deep inside, he knew she was right. Meanwhile, inside Iron Dominion's headquarters, Garrett Sloan watched security footage from the previous night. Victor Kane stood beside him. The operation went exactly as planned. Garrett leaned forward. "The box." Victor placed the rusted ammunition case on the conference table. "We recovered it." Garrett slowly opened the lid. Inside were dozens of neatly organized engineering drawings, old notebooks, prototype calculations, photographs. For several long seconds, no one spoke. Garrett's confident smile slowly faded. Every page carried dates years before Iron Dominion had patented its billion-dollar combustion system. One notebook even contained Isaiah's signature beneath the original concept sketches. Garrett slammed it shut. "No one sees this." Victor hesitated. "What do you want me to do?" Garrett's voice became frighteningly calm. "Burn everything." Victor looked surprised. "All of it. Every page." "And Isaiah?" Garrett stared out the window. "If he has no evidence." He smiled coldly. "Then he's just another homeless man telling impossible stories." Victor picked up the box. "As you wish." Across town, Benjamin Cole sat inside his office, reviewing Olivia Mercer's latest report. She entered carrying another folder. "I found something else." Benjamin looked up. "What is it?" "Police records." She handed him several printed documents. There was an anonymous complaint filed just after midnight. Benjamin scanned the page. "Property destruction under the Riverside Bridge." His expression darkened. "The victim, Isaiah Brooks." Benjamin looked toward the city skyline. "This isn't random anymore." Olivia nodded. "I don't think it ever was." Before either of them could continue, Benjamin's phone vibrated. The caller ID displayed one name: Garrett Sloan. Benjamin answered. "Morning, Garrett." Garrett's cheerful voice sounded almost rehearsed. "I heard you've been spending time around the city." Benjamin smiled slightly. "I enjoy motorcycle culture." "So do I." A brief silence followed. Then Garrett casually asked, "You haven't happened to meet any unusual mechanics recently, have you?" Benjamin's eyes narrowed. "What makes you ask?" "Oh, nothing." Garrett chuckled. "Just making conversation." Benjamin ended the call less than a minute later. He stared at the silent phone. "He knows." Olivia looked confused. He knows you're asking questions. Benjamin slowly nodded. And that means he's afraid. Back beneath the bridge, Isaiah had just finished gathering the last of his scattered tools when 2 Milwaukee police cruisers rolled to a stop. 4 officers stepped out. Leading them was Detective Ronald Pierce. Isaiah Brooks. Isaiah stood calmly. Yes. Pierce removed a folded document from his jacket. We have a warrant to question you regarding felony vandalism and attempted sabotage at Iron Dominion Motor Company. Eleanor gasped. That's impossible. Isaiah looked genuinely confused. I've never been inside that building. Pierce's face remained expressionless. A security guard identified you. I was here all night. Tell it to the judge. One officer stepped behind Isaiah. Cold steel handcuffs snapped around his wrists. The metallic click echoed beneath the bridge. People from nearby businesses began gathering. Some lifted their phones. Others whispered. Isn't that the homeless mechanic? I thought he helped people. Maybe it was all an act. Isaiah didn't resist. He quietly turned toward Eleanor. Would you do me a favor? Tears filled her eyes. Anything. If anyone asks. He paused. Tell them I never stopped telling the truth. The police guided him toward the cruiser. Just as the rear door was about to close, a sharp voice cut across the crowd. Wait. Everyone turned. An older woman in a worn gray coat hurried toward the officers, clutching a weathered leather briefcase against her chest. Her breathing was uneven, but determination shone in her eyes. Don't take him away. Detective Pierce frowned. Ma'am, this is official police business. I know exactly what it is. She looked directly at Isaiah. Recognition flashed across both of their faces. Isaiah whispered in disbelief. Margaret. The woman nodded slowly. It's been a long time. She lifted the old briefcase. I've been waiting 23 years for the courage to do this. Garrett Sloan thought he had destroyed every piece of evidence. He was wrong, because inside that battered leather case lay a secret powerful enough to bring an empire to its knees. The back door of the police cruiser remained open. Detective Ronald Pierce looked impatiently at the elderly woman standing before him. Ma'am, unless you're Isaiah Brooks's attorney, I suggest you step aside. The woman tightened her grip on the worn leather briefcase. My name is Margaret Ellis, she said firmly. For 15 years, I served as executive legal secretary at Iron Dominion Motor Company. The crowd fell silent. Even Isaiah stared at her in disbelief. He had not seen Margaret since the day security escorted him out of Iron Dominion 23 years earlier. Back then, she had been one of the few employees who had quietly whispered, I don't believe what they're saying about you. Margaret looked at Isaiah, her eyes glistening. I'm sorry it took me this long. Isaiah's voice was barely above a whisper. You survived. So did you. Detective Pierce sighed. If this is about something that happened 20 years ago, it can wait. It can't, Margaret replied. She slowly opened the weathered briefcase. Inside were dozens of neatly organized folders, old company memos, payroll records, handwritten meeting notes, and several optical backup discs sealed inside protective sleeves. I've carried these documents almost every day since I resigned. Pierce frowned. What exactly am I looking at? Margaret pulled out a faded envelope marked Confidential. The reason Isaiah Brooks lost everything. Nearly 24 years earlier, Margaret had been assigned to prepare confidential board meeting transcripts. One evening, she accidentally entered Garrett Sloan's office after hours. The door had been left slightly open. Inside, Garrett wasn't alone. 3 senior executives stood around Isaiah's prototype engine drawings, spread across the conference table. Margaret remembered every word. Garrett had tapped Isaiah's design with a silver pen. "Gentlemen, this invention will save the company." One executive hesitated, "But Brooks owns the design." Garrett smiled. "Not for long." Another executive asked quietly, "What about royalties?" Garrett laughed. "There won't be any." "And Isaiah?" Garrett's expression had turned cold. "We'll make sure nobody believes him." Margaret had frozen outside the doorway. She wanted to report what she'd heard. But Garrett had become CEO within months. Everyone who questioned him mysteriously disappeared from the company. Some were fired, some resigned, others simply stopped talking. Margaret stayed silent for 23 years. The guilt had never left. Back in the present, Detective Pierce carefully examined several documents. One memo immediately caught his attention. Emergency Executive Session Confidential Attendees: Garrett Sloan, Charles Benton, William Hargrove. The meeting date occurred 3 days before Isaiah was accused of stealing company property. Pierce looked up. "Where did these come from?" "My office. You kept confidential corporate records. I kept proof." Isaiah slowly lowered his head. "You should have burned them." Margaret looked at him with tears forming again. "I almost did. But every time I reached for the matches, I remembered your face when they walked you out of that building." Silence settled over everyone standing beneath the bridge. Even the officers exchanged uneasy glances. One younger patrol officer quietly asked Detective Pierce, "Sir, if this is legitimate?" Pierce answered without taking his eyes off the papers. "Then somebody lied to us." Before anyone could continue, another black SUV pulled up beside the police cruisers. Benjamin Cole stepped out. Unlike before, he made no attempt to hide who he was. The officers immediately recognized him. Detective Pierce straightened. "Mr. Cole." Benjamin nodded politely. "I understand Mr. Brooks has been detained." "For questioning." Benjamin glanced toward Isaiah's handcuffs. "He doesn't look like someone being questioned." No one answered. Benjamin turned toward Margaret. "You must be Mrs. Ellis." She blinked in surprise. "You know who I am?" "I've spent all morning learning everything I can about Iron Dominion." He accepted one of the folders from her. As he skimmed the pages, his expression hardened. So Garrett Sloan wasn't protecting company secrets. He looked directly at Isaiah. He was protecting himself. Isaiah remained silent. Years of disappointment had taught him not to trust hope too quickly. Benjamin noticed. "You don't believe this changes anything?" Isaiah managed a tired smile. "I've watched evidence disappear before." Benjamin nodded slowly. "Fair enough." He turned back to Detective Pierce. "I'm requesting that these materials be entered into official evidence immediately." Pierce hesitated. "I'll need authorization." Benjamin reached into his jacket and handed over a business card. The detective's eyes widened. Benjamin Cole, founder and chairman, Cole Venture Holdings. Estimated assets $18.4 billion. Several officers exchanged stunned looks. The same man whose Harley Isaiah had repaired for free was one of the wealthiest investors in the country. Benjamin spoke calmly. "My legal team is already on its way. If these documents disappear," he paused, "I promise your department will answer very difficult questions." Detective Pierce immediately nodded. "I'll personally log every item." Margaret quietly exhaled in relief, for the first time in decades. She felt the truth might actually survive. Across the city, Victor Kane rushed into Garrett Sloan's office. Garrett looked up impatiently. "What now?" Victor closed the door. "We have a problem." Garrett frowned. I thought the bridge operation cleaned everything. Victor swallowed. It didn't. Garrett slowly stood. What do you mean? A former legal secretary came forward. Victor placed several surveillance photographs on the desk. Garrett stared at the image of Margaret standing beside Isaiah. His face turned pale. No, Victor continued. She brought documents. Garrett's breathing became noticeably heavier. What documents? We don't know yet. Garrett slammed both hands onto the desk. You should know. Victor remained silent. Garrett suddenly grabbed his phone. Call our IT director. Now. Seconds later, the line connected. This is Andrew. Garrett didn't waste a second. I need every archived company email from 23 years ago permanently erased. Andrew hesitated. Sir. Those backups were migrated years ago. Garrett froze. What? There are off-site archive servers. Garrett's heartbeat quickened. Delete those too. Andrew's voice grew nervous. I can't. Why not? They're locked under federal corporate retention regulations. For the first time in decades, Garrett Sloan felt genuine fear. Because somewhere, beyond his reach, the digital trail of his biggest crime might still exist. And if someone found it before he did, everything he had built would collapse. The evidence from Margaret Ellis was logged into police custody before noon. Benjamin Cole made sure of it. He watched every folder receive an evidence tag, every backup disk sealed inside tamper-proof bags, and every signature recorded. Garrett Sloan had spent more than 2 decades controlling every narrative around Isaiah Brooks. For the first time, that control was slipping through his fingers. But Garrett wasn't finished fighting. Within hours, Milwaukee's local news stations began running nearly identical headlines. Former Iron Dominion employee detained in sabotage investigation. The reports never mentioned Isaiah's years of helping struggling riders. They never mentioned the stolen evidence beneath the bridge. Instead, old company photographs flashed across television screens, while anonymous industry insiders described Isaiah as a disgruntled former employee obsessed with revenge. Sitting alone in the police interview room, Isaiah watched the broadcast without changing his expression. Detective Ronald Pierce entered carrying 2 cups of coffee. I figured you might want something warm. Isaiah nodded politely. Thank you. Pierce sat across from him. I've read every document Mrs. Ellis brought. And they raised serious questions. Isaiah smiled faintly, but not enough answers. Pierce didn't deny it. The problem is that old documents can be challenged. They'll say they're fabricated. They'll say memories fade. Isaiah looked down at his scarred hands. They'll say exactly what Garrett has always said. Silence settled between them. Finally, Pierce leaned forward. Tell me something honestly. If you knew all this evidence still existed, why didn't you spend 23 years fighting back? Isaiah took a slow breath before answering. Because every lawyer I visited asked the same question. What proof do you have? And every year, my proof became harder to find. He looked toward the small window in the interview room. Eventually, surviving became more important than winning. Across town, Garrett Sloan had transformed the executive conference room into a war room. Televisions covered one wall. Public relations advisors filled the seats. Corporate attorneys joined by video conference. Garrett paced furiously. I don't care how much it costs. I want Isaiah Brooks discredited before the week is over. One PR consultant raised a hand cautiously. We've already pushed the sabotage narrative. Garrett shook his head. Not enough. I want the public convinced he's unstable. Another executive hesitated. What if Benjamin Cole keeps supporting him? Garrett stopped walking. His eyes narrowed. Then we destroy Benjamin's confidence too. He turned toward Victor Kane. Find every mistake Isaiah has ever made. If you can't find one. His voice became ice cold. Create one. Victor understood immediately. Late that afternoon, Detective Pierce received an urgent phone call. His expression changed as he listened. What? He stood abruptly. When did this happen? After hanging up, he hurried into the interview room. Mr. Brooks, Isaiah looked up. The district attorney has declined to file criminal charges. Isaiah blinked. So I'm free. Yes. But Pierce hesitated. There was another development. What kind? Someone broke into the police evidence archive less than 30 minutes ago. Isaiah's heart sank. The documents. Pierce shook his head. They're still there. Isaiah frowned. Then what were they after? The backup discs. For a moment, neither man spoke. They failed, Pierce continued. Our evidence technician had already transferred them to the digital forensics unit. Isaiah slowly closed his eyes. Garrett was panicking. Meanwhile, Benjamin Cole sat inside the headquarters of Cole Venture Holdings with Olivia Mercer. Several cybersecurity specialists surrounded a conference table covered with laptops. One analyst looked up. We found something unusual. Benjamin approached. What is it? The archived Iron Dominion servers. The analyst enlarged a timeline on the screen. About 2 hours ago, someone with executive-level credentials attempted to erase historical email archives. Benjamin's expression hardened. Were they successful? No. Why, federal retention systems automatically mirrored every archive to an off-site compliance server. Olivia exchanged a quick glance with Benjamin. So the emails still exist. The analyst nodded. Every one of them. Benjamin smiled for the first time that day. Good. Can we access them legally? If a court authorizes discovery. Benjamin looked out the window toward the Milwaukee skyline. I think that authorization is coming. As evening approached, Isaiah returned beneath the bridge for the first time since the attack. Most of the debris had been cleared away by neighbors. Luis, the young delivery rider, had rebuilt the workbench. The elderly veteran had brought a replacement toolbox. Miss Eleanor arrived carrying fresh blankets. Without saying a word, each person quietly contributed something. A hammer, a lantern, a folding chair, a small coffee maker. Isaiah looked around in disbelief. You didn't have to do this. Luis smiled. You repaired my Harley when nobody else would. The veteran chuckled. You've helped half this neighborhood. Miss Eleanor folded her arms. Now let us help you. For several seconds, Isaiah couldn't speak. He had spent years believing he was alone. He wasn't. Just after sunset, Benjamin walked beneath the bridge carrying a slim black folder. I hoped I'd find you here. Isaiah stood. I suppose I owe you another thank you. Benjamin shook his head. No. You already repaid me. He looked toward the rebuilt workbench. You reminded me that integrity still exists. Benjamin handed Isaiah the folder. Inside was an invitation embossed in silver. National American Motorcycle Engineering Exhibition, Chicago. 3 days away. Isaiah frowned. I don't belong there. Benjamin smiled. I disagree. Every major manufacturer will be there. So will Garrett Sloan. Isaiah slowly closed the folder. You want me to confront him. I want the truth to confront him. Isaiah looked toward the dark river flowing beneath the bridge. For 23 years he had hidden from the world that betrayed him. Walking into that exhibition meant stepping back into the life he had buried. I don't even have clothes suitable for a place like that. Benjamin smiled. I'm not inviting your clothes. He looked Isaiah directly in the eye. I'm inviting the engineer who designed an engine so far ahead of its time that powerful men stole it instead of competing with it. Isaiah remained silent. Before he could answer, Benjamin's phone vibrated. Olivia's voice came through the speaker. Benjamin, you need to hear this. The digital forensic team just located an archived email. Benjamin's expression sharpened. Who sent it? Olivia paused. It was sent by Garrett Sloan. The night before Isaiah was fired. Benjamin slowly looked back at Isaiah. If that email contained what they suspected, everything was about to change. Isaiah Brooks barely slept that night. Benjamin's invitation lay on the small folding table beneath the bridge, illuminated by the soft glow of a camping lantern. The silver letters seemed almost unreal. National American Motorcycle Engineering Exhibition. For 23 years, Isaiah had avoided every engineering conference, every industry event, every place where people might recognize his name. He had convinced himself that his old life was over. Now it was asking him to return. At sunrise, Benjamin arrived with Olivia Mercer and a garment bag draped over one arm. I thought you might need this. Isaiah opened the bag and found a charcoal gray suit, a crisp white shirt, and a deep blue tie. He smiled awkwardly. It's been a long time since I wore one of these. Benjamin chuckled. The suit doesn't matter. Isaiah looked up. The man inside it does. 3 days later. Chicago's Grand Lakes Convention Center buzzed with excitement. Manufacturers from across the country displayed prototype motorcycles beneath dazzling lights. Television crews moved between exhibits, interviewing engineers about the future of American performance bikes. A massive banner hung from the ceiling. The future of motorcycle engineering starts here. Luxury vehicles lined the entrance. Executives greeted investors with polished smiles. Then Isaiah stepped out of Benjamin's SUV. Although clean-shaven and neatly dressed, years of hardship could not be hidden completely. The faint scars on his hands, the quiet caution in his eyes, and the humble way he carried himself still revealed a life shaped by struggle. Some attendees barely noticed him. Others did. A young engineer whispered to his colleague, "Who's that?" "No idea." "Looks like someone's driver." Isaiah heard them. He simply continued walking. Benjamin noticed. "You all right?" Isaiah nodded. "I've heard worse." Inside the exhibition hall, Garrett Sloan stood proudly beside Iron Dominion's newest flagship motorcycle. Television cameras surrounded him. On our next-generation combustion platform, Garrett announced confidently, represents the greatest engineering leap in modern American motorcycling. Applause echoed through the hall. Then Garrett looked toward the entrance. His smile froze. Isaiah Brooks had just walked inside. For a brief moment, Garrett forgot every prepared speech, every camera, every investor. His heartbeat quickened. "No," he whispered. Benjamin calmly escorted Isaiah toward the main stage. Journalists immediately recognized Benjamin. Camera flashes exploded. One reporter called out, "Mr. Cole, is this your new lead engineer?" before Benjamin could answer. Garrett marched across the showroom floor. His polished shoes clicked sharply against the marble. The entire crowd instinctively stepped aside. Garrett stopped less than 3 feet from Isaiah. A slow smile spread across his face. "I should have known." His voice carried across the exhibition hall. The homeless mechanic finally found himself a billionaire sponsor. A few people laughed nervously. Garrett circled Isaiah like a predator. "You clean up better than I expected." He tugged lightly at Isaiah's jacket sleeve. "Funny how expensive clothes can't hide 23 years of failure." Isaiah remained silent. Garrett leaned closer. "Tell me, did Benjamin rescue you from under your bridge this morning?" More uneasy laughter. Several television cameras turned toward the confrontation. Benjamin stepped forward. "That's enough." Garrett raised a hand dismissively. "I'm simply welcoming an old employee." Then his expression hardened. "Or should I call you what everyone else remembers?" He looked directly into Isaiah's eyes. "The engineer who stole from his own company." A wave of murmurs swept through the crowd. Isaiah finally spoke. "I never stole anything." Garrett laughed loudly. "No. Then where have you been for 23 years? Isaiah answered calmly. "Surviving." Garrett's smile faded for a fraction of a second. The confidence in Isaiah's voice unsettled him. Before Garrett could continue, an announcement echoed through the convention center. "Attention, ladies and gentlemen. Our live engineering demonstration will begin in 10 minutes. Engineers gathered around the main demonstration platform. At the center sat Iron Dominion's newest prototype engine mounted on a testing stand. Television cameras repositioned. Investors filled the front rows. Garrett immediately regained his confidence. "This," he announced proudly, "will remind everyone why Iron Dominion remains the industry leader." The chief engineer pressed the ignition button. The engine cranked. Once, twice, then silence. He frowned. Again. The starter motor whined. Nothing. Another engineer connected diagnostic equipment. 5 long minutes passed. The prototype remained completely lifeless. Whispers spread rapidly through the audience. Garrett's jaw tightened. "What is happening?" The lead engineer swallowed nervously. We're not sure. Fix it. We're trying." Another 10 minutes passed. Sweat formed on every engineer's forehead. The investors began exchanging uneasy looks. Television cameras stayed focused on the motionless engine. Garrett could feel millions of dollars slipping away by the second. Then, a quiet voice came from behind the crowd. "May I take a look?" Every head turned. Isaiah stood calmly with his hands in his pockets. Garrett burst into laughter. "You!" The crowd joined him. Garrett wiped tears of amusement from his eyes. "This is priceless." He turned toward the audience. "My elite engineering team can't solve the problem. But somehow the homeless mechanic thinks he can." Several executives laughed openly. Garrett pointed toward the exit. "Go back to fixing old Harleys under bridges. This machine is worth more than your entire life." Isaiah didn't move. "I only asked to look." Garrett stepped closer until they stood face to face. "You'll never touch one of my engines again." Benjamin calmly interrupted. "Actually." He looked toward the event organizers. "I'd like to formally request that Mr. Isaiah Brooks be allowed to inspect the prototype." Gasps echoed through the room. Garrett spun toward Benjamin. "Have you completely lost your mind?" Benjamin remained composed. "If your engineers are certain they're the best." He smiled slightly. "They shouldn't be afraid of one homeless mechanic." The hall fell into complete silence. Dozens of cameras zoomed in. The organizers exchanged uncertain glances. Finally, the chief judge stepped forward. "We have nothing to lose." He looked at Isaiah. "Mr. Brooks, you have 5 minutes." Garrett folded his arms and smirked confidently. "Perfect." He leaned toward Isaiah one last time and whispered, "When you fail in front of this entire industry, they'll finally stop pretending you're anything more than a homeless black mechanic." Isaiah quietly rolled up his sleeves. Then, for the first time in 23 years, he placed both hands on the kind of engine he had once devoted his life to building. The entire convention center held its breath. Silence settled over the convention hall. Hundreds of people watched Isaiah Brooks step toward the disabled prototype engine. Television cameras zoomed in, broadcasting every movement onto giant screens hanging above the exhibition floor. Garrett Sloan folded his arms confidently. This should be entertaining. His senior engineers exchanged smug smiles. One of them muttered loudly enough for nearby reporters to hear. "He's going to embarrass himself before he even opens the engine." Isaiah ignored every word. Instead of reaching for a wrench, he slowly closed his eyes. Then he rested 2 fingertips lightly against the aluminum valve cover. The gesture puzzled everyone. Garrett laughed again. "What is this prayer?" Several people chuckled. Isaiah remained perfectly still. He listened, not to voices, to the machine. After nearly 30 seconds, he opened his eyes. "Who assembled the fuel delivery system?" The chief engineer frowned. "I did." Isaiah nodded politely. "You followed the blueprint exactly?" "Of course." Isaiah looked at the engine once more. "No." A ripple spread through the audience. "You trusted the blueprint. But whoever created that blueprint made a mistake." Garrett's smile widened. "Enough of this nonsense." Isaiah calmly pointed toward the rear of the engine. "The secondary fuel pressure regulator is installed 3 millimeters too high." The chief engineer immediately shook his head. "Impossible. We measured everything with lasers." Isaiah didn't argue. "Then remove the intake cover." The chief judge looked toward Garrett. Garrett shrugged confidently. "Fine. Let's prove him wrong." Within moments, technicians removed the intake assembly. Measurements were taken. Digital calipers displayed the result on a nearby monitor, 3.02 millimeters. The room fell silent. The chief engineer stared at the screen. "No." He measured again. The reading didn't change. Isaiah spoke quietly. "The regulator sits too high. Underload fuel pressure collapses. The engine floods before ignition stabilizes." One television commentator whispered into his microphone. He diagnosed that without touching a single sensor. Garrett's confident expression cracked for the first time. "It could be coincidence." Isaiah shook his head. "No." He pointed toward another section. "There's a second problem." The technicians looked confused. "The timing wheel. It's balanced for the old compression ratio." The chief engineer frowned. "How could you possibly know that?" Isaiah smiled faintly. "Because the vibration pattern tells you." Garrett slammed a hand onto the demonstration platform. "Stop listening to him." But the judges were already curious. "Check it." The engineers removed another cover. Again. Measurements matched Isaiah's prediction exactly. A murmur swept through the convention center. Investors leaned forward. Journalists exchanged stunned looks. Benjamin Cole quietly smiled. He wasn't surprised anymore. He was simply watching the truth finally surface. Garrett stepped forward, forcing another laugh. So what? You spotted two assembly mistakes. Any experienced mechanic could. Isaiah finally looked directly at him. No. The assembly wasn't wrong. The blueprint was. Every conversation stopped instantly. Garrett's heartbeat quickened. What did you say? Isaiah turned toward the judges. Would you like to know why your engineers couldn't solve this? No one interrupted. Because they trusted a design that was never completed. He pointed toward the combustion chamber displayed on the monitor. Like that cooling channel is missing. The chief engineer blinked. There isn't supposed to be one. Isaiah quietly replied, There is. Garrett felt the blood drain from his face. Isaiah continued, The original design always included an auxiliary cooling passage beneath cylinder 3. It prevented thermal expansion during sustained high-output operation. One judge frowned. How do you know that? Isaiah answered without hesitation. Because I designed it. The audience erupted into whispers. Garrett immediately shouted, He's lying. Isaiah calmly continued speaking, as though Garrett hadn't interrupted. Someone removed the passage before filing the production patent. Probably because machining it increased manufacturing costs. Benjamin glanced toward Garrett. The billionaire's face had become almost colorless. The chief judge crossed his arms. If such a passage exists, can you prove it? Isaiah nodded. Give me 10 minutes. Garrett laughed loudly again. Go ahead. This should be good. Isaiah rolled the engine stand toward a nearby tool station. His hands moved with remarkable confidence. Every bolt came off in the exact order. No hesitation. No wasted motion. Several veteran engineers exchanged surprised glances. One whispered, He's working from memory. Another slowly replied, No. He's working like the man who invented it. After several minutes, Isaiah removed a small inspection plate hidden beneath the cylinder bank. He pointed inside with a flashlight. Look. The inspection camera was lowered into the opening. The image appeared on every giant screen, inside the casting. A narrow, unfinished channel stopped halfway through the engine block. The audience gasped. It wasn't an aftermarket modification. It had been cast into the prototype itself, then sealed shut before production. Isaiah quietly explained, They copied my earliest draft, but not the final revision. Garrett stumbled backward. No. Benjamin watched Garrett carefully. He had seen billion-dollar negotiations collapse before. He recognized panic. This wasn't the panic of a businessman losing a deal. This was the panic of a man watching decades of lies begin to unravel. One of the senior judges looked toward Isaiah. If what you're saying is true, can you make it run? Isaiah nodded once. I can. The judge stepped aside. You have permission. Isaiah modified the regulator height, adjusted the timing wheel, bypassed the incomplete cooling circuit long enough for demonstration purposes. Finally. He wiped his hands with a clean shop towel. The hall became so quiet that even camera shutters could be heard. Isaiah looked toward the control panel. You can start it now. The chief engineer hesitated, then pressed the ignition button. The starter motor turned once, twice. On the third revolution, the engine exploded to life with a deep, perfectly balanced roar that echoed through the entire convention center. Thunderous applause erupted. Many people instinctively stood. Several engineers simply stared at Isaiah in disbelief. Garrett didn't clap. He couldn't. Because as the flawless engine idled behind him, Olivia Mercer hurried through the crowd holding a tablet. She stopped beside Benjamin and whispered only one sentence. The forensic team recovered the archived email. Benjamin looked at the screen. His eyes widened. The message contained only 9 devastating words from Garrett Sloan to 3 executives. Erase Brooks' name. The invention belongs to me now. Benjamin slowly lifted his eyes toward Garrett. The applause filling the convention hall suddenly sounded like the beginning of the end. The applause still echoed through the convention hall when Benjamin Cole slowly stepped onto the demonstration stage. He wasn't smiling anymore. The tablet in his hand contained something far more valuable than applause. It contained the truth. Garrett Sloan forced a laugh and adjusted his expensive suit jacket. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced into the nearest microphone, "what you've just witnessed is nothing more than an experienced mechanic making a few fortunate observations. Iron Dominion appreciates enthusiasm, but let's not confuse guesswork with engineering." A few polite claps answered him. Far fewer than before. Benjamin calmly raised one hand. "I don't think anyone should leave just yet." The room quieted almost instantly. Reporters instinctively turned their cameras toward him. Benjamin looked at the panel of judges. "With your permission, I'd like to present newly recovered evidence directly related to the ownership of this engine's original design." The chief judge nodded. "You may proceed." Garrett's confidence began to crack. "This exhibition isn't a courtroom." "No," Benjamin replied evenly. "But truth doesn't require a courtroom before it deserves to be heard." Olivia Mercer connected her tablet to the massive presentation screen suspended above the stage. Within seconds, an email appeared before hundreds of engineers, investors, journalists, and executives. The timestamp read September 18th, 23 years earlier. The sender, Garrett Sloan. The recipients, 3 senior executives. Benjamin read the message aloud. "Erase Brooks's name. The invention belongs to me now. Once he's gone, no one will question who created it." A wave of shocked murmurs swept across the convention hall. Garrett immediately pointed toward the screen. "That's fabricated." Benjamin didn't respond. Instead, Olivia opened another file. This archive was recovered from federally protected compliance servers. She looked directly at the judges. The metadata confirms it has never been modified since the day it was stored. One of the judges adjusted his glasses. "The digital signature is authentic." Garrett's face turned pale. Then Margaret Ellis slowly walked onto the stage. The audience recognized her from earlier news coverage. She carried the same weathered leather briefcase. "I remained silent for 23 years, she said, her voice trembling. "I've regretted every one of those years." She removed a stack of original board meeting transcripts. "I typed these myself." The pages were projected onto the giant screen. Every signature matched company records. One paragraph froze the room. Mr. Sloan proposed removing engineer Isaiah Brooks from the project before patent filing to simplify ownership rights. Gasps spread through the audience. Garrett shouted, "Those minutes were never approved." Margaret looked at him with quiet sadness. "Oh, they weren't approved because you ordered me to rewrite them." She reached into the briefcase once more. "But I kept the originals." Silence followed. Garrett took an unconscious step backward. Detective Ronald Pierce entered the convention hall, accompanied by 2 investigators from the state's Financial Crimes Division. They approached the stage without interrupting. Benjamin noticed them. So did Garrett. For the first time all day. Fear became visible on Garrett's face. Benjamin looked toward Isaiah. "You've waited a long time." Isaiah answered softly. "I stopped waiting years ago." Benjamin nodded. "Then let justice catch up." Olivia opened one final folder. This comes from Iron Dominion's archived engineering server. Hundreds of engineering files appeared on the screen. Version histories, design revisions, timestamps, author records. One highlighted line captured everyone's attention. Original designer Isaiah Brooks, modified later by Garrett Sloan. The room exploded into conversation. Engineers stood from their seats. Several immediately began photographing the screen. Industry journalists dictated breaking news updates into live microphones. One veteran engineer whispered in disbelief, "We've been teaching his stolen work for 2 decades." Garrett suddenly lunged toward the presentation console. "Turn it off." Before he reached it, Detective Pierce stepped directly into his path. "Don't." Garrett glared. "You have no authority here." Pierce calmly removed an official document from his jacket. "What I do now?" He unfolded the warrant. "Garrett Sloan, you are under investigation for corporate fraud, destruction of evidence, conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and theft of intellectual property." The entire hall fell silent. Garrett looked desperately toward Victor Kane. "Do something." Victor didn't move. He slowly lowered his eyes. Another investigator approached Victor. "Mr. Kane, we'll need you to come with us as well." Victor closed his eyes. 23 years of loyalty vanished in a single moment. "I'll cooperate." Garrett stared at him in disbelief. "You can't betray me." Victor answered quietly. "I already betrayed the wrong man once." He looked toward Isaiah. "I'm done doing it." Detective Pierce stepped closer. "Mr. Sloan, please place your hands behind your back." Garrett laughed nervously. This is ridiculous." "I'm the CEO of Iron Dominion," Pierce replied. Not for much longer. The cold steel handcuffs clicked shut around Garrett's wrists. The sound echoed through the convention center. It was the exact sound Isaiah had heard beneath the bridge only days earlier. Only this time, justice had found the right man. Television cameras captured every second live. Flashes erupted across the hall. Garrett looked toward Isaiah one last time. "You think you've won." Isaiah slowly shook his head. This was never about winning. He looked around at the hundreds of people who had finally seen the truth. It was about making sure honesty didn't stay buried forever. Benjamin stepped beside him. "Iron Dominion's board has already called an emergency vote." Olivia glanced at her phone. "It's unanimous." Benjamin smiled. "Garrett Sloan has been removed as CEO, effective immediately." The audience rose to its feet, not for the engine, not for the billionaire, but for the quiet, homeless mechanic who had refused $5,000 because his integrity had never been for sale. As Garrett was escorted toward the exit, reporters rushed after the officers. Isaiah remained where he stood, staring at the engine that had once cost him everything. He gently rested one grease-scarred hand on the polished metal. For the first time in 23 years, it finally felt like it belonged to him again. The convention hall remained standing long after Garrett Sloan disappeared through the exit in handcuffs. No one seemed eager to leave. For years, they had admired one of the most celebrated executives in American motorcycle manufacturing. In less than an hour, they had watched his entire legacy collapse. Isaiah Brooks stood quietly beside the demonstration engine, almost unnoticed amid the cameras and reporters surrounding him. Victory didn't look the way he had imagined all those years ago. There was no shouting, no celebration, only a deep sense of peace. Benjamin Cole walked over and extended his hand. "This belongs to you." Isaiah looked confused. Benjamin handed him the original engineering notebook Margaret had preserved. Detective Pierce had recovered it from the evidence collected after Garrett's arrest. Although Garrett's men had stolen the metal ammunition box from beneath the bridge, they had never managed to destroy everything. Some pages had already been copied into Iron Dominion's archives years earlier, while Margaret's documents and the federal email backups filled in the missing pieces. Isaiah slowly opened the notebook. The first page contained the same words he had written nearly a quarter-century earlier. Build machines that protect the rider, not the ego of the engineer. His fingers trembled. I thought I'd never see this again. Benjamin smiled. Some truths take longer to return than others. 3 days later, Iron Dominion's board of directors held an emergency press conference. Every major news network carried it live. The company's interim chairwoman stepped to the podium. Today, on behalf of Iron Dominion Motor Company, we offer our deepest apology to Mr. Isaiah Brooks. Hundreds of reporters listened in complete silence. Our internal investigation confirms that Mr. Brooks was wrongfully accused, unlawfully stripped of authorship, and denied the recognition he earned through his work. She paused before continuing. Effective immediately, every patent connected to the disputed combustion technology will be amended to recognize Isaiah Brooks as its original inventor. Applause filled the room. But words alone cannot repair 23 stolen years. She announced that the company had reached a historic settlement, with Isaiah restoring full intellectual property rights, paying decades of unpaid royalties, and creating a permanent scholarship fund in his name for aspiring mechanical engineers from disadvantaged communities. For the first time in company history, employees stood and applauded not a CEO, but an engineer. The following week, Garrett Sloan appeared before a federal judge. Evidence continued pouring in. Former executives testified. Victor Kane admitted he had supervised surveillance intimidation and the theft of Isaiah's documents under Garrett's direct orders. Margaret Ellis provided sworn testimony. Digital forensic experts authenticated every archived email. The prosecution's case became overwhelming. Garrett accepted responsibility for multiple felony charges involving corporate fraud, conspiracy, destruction of evidence, and intellectual property theft. As officers escorted him from the courtroom, reporters shouted questions. Garrett never answered. His empire had not been destroyed by a competitor. It had been destroyed by the truth he had underestimated. Benjamin kept another promise. 6 months later, an abandoned manufacturing facility on Milwaukee's south side reopened under a new name, the Brooks Institute of Motorcycle Engineering. The building was nothing like the glamorous headquarters of Iron Dominion. It didn't need to be. Its classrooms welcomed military veterans searching for new careers, teenagers aging out of foster care, unemployed mechanics, and people who had been told too many times that they would never amount to anything. Tuition was completely free. Benjamin funded the project. Isaiah led it. On the first day of classes, nearly 100 students filled the workshop. Instead of beginning with textbooks, Isaiah placed an old carburetor on the workbench. "What do you see?" he asked. One student answered, "A broken part." Another said, "Scrap metal." Isaiah smiled. "I see potential." He looked around the room. "And that's exactly how I see every one of you." The room fell silent. Many students had heard those words from no one before. Life beneath the bridge slowly became a memory. Isaiah purchased a modest brick home on a quiet street. Nothing extravagant. He still drove an old pickup truck. He still carried the same weathered toolbox. He still repaired motorcycles for neighbors without charging them. Luis eventually became one of the institute's instructors. The elderly veteran volunteered every Wednesday. Miss Eleanor managed the community kitchen that served free lunches to every student. Margaret Ellis finally retired, without carrying the burden of guilt that had haunted her for decades. Detective Ronald Pierce often visited the campus. Whenever someone praised him for helping expose Garrett Sloan, he always gave the same answer. "I didn't save Isaiah Brooks. I simply stopped ignoring the truth." One warm Saturday morning, nearly a year after the convention, a teenage boy pushed an old Harley into the Institute's workshop. "I'm sorry," the boy said nervously. "I don't have enough money." Isaiah looked at the motorcycle, then at the young rider. He smiled. "Let's see what it's trying to tell us." The boy looked puzzled. Isaiah gently rested his hand on the fuel tank. "Every engine tells a story." As several students gathered around to watch, Isaiah patiently explained each repair, encouraging them to listen instead of guessing. Within minutes, the Harley roared back to life. The teenager reached into his pocket and counted a handful of crumpled bills. "It's all I have." Isaiah slowly folded the boy's fingers back over the money. "Keep it. But use it to buy fuel." The teenager's eyes filled with gratitude. "How can I ever repay you?" Isaiah glanced around the workshop filled with students learning, laughing, and believing in themselves. When someone else needs help, he smiled. Be the reason they keep going. The Harley rolled out of the workshop, its deep rumble fading into the afternoon sunshine. Isaiah watched until it disappeared around the corner. Almost exactly the way another Harley had disappeared one rainy afternoon, the day everything had changed forever. Some people believed Benjamin Cole had rescued a homeless mechanic. They were wrong. Benjamin had simply recognized what the world had forgotten. A man without a home is not a man without value. And sometimes the greatest engine ever built is not the one inside a motorcycle. It's the human heart that refuses to stop moving forward.
Never judge someone's worth by their appearance, their struggles, or where life has temporarily placed them. Integrity, kindness, and perseverance often remain invisible until the moment truth shines its light. If Isaiah's journey inspired you, share your thoughts in the comments, tell us where you're watching from, and subscribe for more stories that remind us why character will always outlast power.